remember. Oh, well. Lucky Claudine's not here to yell at me.
Well, Vince, you want to get
On the
started?
table.
I'm ready.
Okay, so
Hi, guys.
the drill, we're going to mute everyone, and then if you turn yourself back on when Vince asks to join you, for you to join us through the Serenity
Why
Prayer.
is it skipping the sound?
So here we go. I'm going to mute y'all.
Okay.
Vince, you need to unmute yourself.
Me too. Okay, there we go. Good evening, everybody. Before we get started, I just have a few announcements I want to share with you. I want to mention that Starting Point is offering more educational programs, which will include not only my lectures, other programs and workshops also. We have one starting next week on Tuesday. It's a 10-week program on self-care for teachers. It's called Rejuvenate. It will focus on helping teachers cope with anxiety, stress, and uncertainty. There'll be guest speakers, tips, and resources. And if you're interested, every Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m., it costs $30 for the whole entire 10 weeks, so like $3 a week. And you can get information about it by going to our website, startingpoint.org. Okay, I also want to mention, just to remind people are asked to do this all the time, the 3 books I use a lot are for this particular series is the 12 Steps to Self-Parenting. I think most of you have seen that book before. You can pick it up on Amazon. It's by Philip Diaz and Patricia Gorman. I also do a lot of readings from Meditations with Native American Elders, one of my favorite books. And basically, also the other one I also quote from is Stools and Bottles, which is put out by Hazelton. Okay, just to let you know about them too. Okay, right. I don't have any other commercials right now, except to let you know that we do have a virtual basket. I stole Jerome's job. He can't pass the basket anymore. So the virtual basket's in the chat room. You can check it out. Our Venmo numbers, everything is down there if you want to help us out. Okay. I want to begin tonight by doing a reading. I picked it from my meditation this morning, Meditation with Native American Elders. It fits into our topic perfectly for today. Those who live for one another learn that love is the bond of perfect unity. To serve each other, to respect, to trust, to honor, to love each other, to cooperate with each other, to care, to forgive, to focus on people's good, to laugh with each other, to learn from each other, to pray for each other. These are all acts of love. These values and actions will connect us to one another, especially in the unseen world. O Great Spirit, let me serve the people today. Teach me, God, that this great energy you gave me, the power of love, is something I need to be able to share in order for it to really be strong in my own self. And so, God, we ask you to bless us as we share today the gifts of taking care of ourselves. Okay, we're beginning today with the steps themselves of self-parenting. And we're going to be working on step 1 today. And step 1 is admit our powerlessness to change our past. That our lives have become unmanageable, became willing to surrender to our love and not to our fear. That step itself says something very powerful and very beautiful because it talks a lot about something I started with last week. Remember last week I talked about the 3-legged stool from Stools and Bottles. And I mentioned the 3 elements of the stool that kind of puts things together. And last, I mentioned the inner child. I mentioned the higher parent and the higher power. I'm going to translate them, connect to the first step today a little bit differently. The inner child I want to refer to as the grieving child. And grief is a big part of life. The higher parent is the guide for the child, help the child through his process. And the higher power is the energy and the power of love. So we combine those three together to grieve, to help while we're doing it, and also to realize the importance of the energy of love to do things in a positive way. One of the dangers in doing self-parenting, one of the dangers many of us experience in our life is we have this disease. I find a very interesting disease called control. And so many of us growing up in dysfunctional family systems in one way or another, and I'm beginning to believe that every family is somewhat dysfunctional. It's by human nature. They're human, that's why. And so basically, in growing up in some dysfunctional family systems, and many of us grew up with elements of fear. And fear is a cover word for things such as shame, guilt, worry, abuse. Basically, it's a cover up for abandonment, all many issues that we experience in the course of our life. And as a little child growing up, so many of us have experienced this and gone through these tragedies. And so as a result, then we have a tendency to become frozen. And little children, you got to understand something about that as they're growing up. They kind of take a lot of this stuff on. And even very many times they believe it's their fault, that things aren't the way they want them to be. And so we're going to be very careful as we get into the process of talking about control. Because so many of us, as a result of either a trauma or something we've gone through in our growth process, we have a tendency to want to control situations and control life. The other disease we have very many times is we want to fix things. See, it didn't happen then, we're going to make it happen now. So we get caught up in expectations, all these things that kind of hold us down. And that's why self-parenting is so important. Because the little child deep down inside of each and every one of us goes through what I call a grieving process. It's almost like grieving things we never experienced. I can relate this in very many ways because I never had a normal childhood. I didn't realize till later on in my life that I was grieving my childhood. That I was grieving things I didn't have. And so I'm realizing more and more now the importance of learning how to be able to let grieving take place. But see, some of us have a hard time with grieving. And so very many times we have a tendency to deny, to shut us off, to close ourselves down. And we do that very many times by trying to make things happen that we are powerless over. That's why I love that concept. We admit it, we're powerless to change our past. Our past is part of who we are. It's part of our history. We can't basically change it, but we can learn from it and grow from it. But what happens very many times is people get stuck in their past. And going through the grieving process, a lot of times we experience a lot of anger. I know I look at my own life and never realized this, but I spent a lot of time when I was in the priesthood being angry at my mother, being angry at my family, being angry at the church, being angry at a lot of different things. And what I actually went through in the priesthood was my own rebellion. And I began to do some pretty crazy stuff. But in reality, I realized today I was avoiding and running away from me. I was scared. And so when you have a lot of fear inside of you, you have a tendency to put walls up, and then you try to control situations and control people that are around you. Also, we get caught up in expectations. Now, it's kind of interesting. I always love telling this story. When I was working with a friend of mine, a therapist friend of mine, and I used to have arguments with him all the time. Because I used to have this philosophy that what I wanted, here's a little child inside of me, I wanted the whole entire institution to change to fit me. Now, don't you think that's logical? If I just asked the whole entire country, the institution, if they would just change, then I would be okay. Remember saying this. I used to say all the time, if only the church would change the rules on celibacy, then I would be happy. And I think that's very reasonable. I just basically figure, well, if the whole entire institutional church would change just for me, then everything would be okay. And my friend kept saying to me all the time, it's your issue, not the church's. And I kept saying no. I kept denying it, fighting it, getting angry over it, going through changes with it. and trying to get stuck very many times, many of us do in that bargaining stage. I want things to be the way I want them to be. Here's a couple of examples, two of the clearest examples I have. Years ago, I used to work in Northwestern Institute in Montgomery County. And when I was there, I used to visit the psych unit. And we had this lady that was kind of what we refer to as a regular. She came a lot. She would come in and basically she had so much anger inside of her towards her mother. And she would say over and over and over again, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to get well until my mother admits what she did to me. They bring her mother in, the mother didn't know what she was talking about. She got angrier and angrier and angrier. Because I talked in the codependency series about that word perception. And so the concept was, she used to get angry, beat the pillow, beat her mom, not literally physically, but beat the pillow, which was represented her mom. But then she'd leave and be back again and be back again. She just could not let it go. She could not move on because she could not be able to go through the healing process inside of her. That's why self-parenting is so important. That first step is so important. Because so many times in our life, we try to make our past into something we wanted it to be. And then we had a tendency to kind of do the exact same thing in our relationships. How many times do we end up marrying our mother, marrying our father, marrying somebody we're angry at? And basically we try to fix it. We couldn't fix daddy, so now we're going to fix this character. As a result, then we get caught up in all these crazy behaviors. One of the classic ones I always share is one of the saddest ones I ever worked with in my life. There's a gentleman from Philadelphia who was sexually abused by a clergyman and by his mother and grew up in a totally abusive situation. He spent his whole entire life being angry and being frustrated, both with the church and with his mother, to a point where he died at age 83. And when he died, he still was angry at them. What he didn't understand, and I tried to explain it to him, was even though both of them were dead, he was still giving them the power to abuse them because he kept the abuse alive inside of himself. And one of the hardest things for us to do is to be able to help that little child to go through a healing process. That leads us to the concept of the higher parent. The higher parent is us as adults. And we have to be able to go to a higher level. By a higher level, I simply mean we're going to a level of basically a level of love to be able to look at this stuff in a positive way, look at it through healing eyes. It's not about blaming. It's so easy to blame. It's so easy to be a victim. It's so easy to blame somebody else and say, they did this to me, they did that to me, I'm unhappy because of you, instead of being able to look within our own selves. So the higher parent inside of us has to be able to talk to that little child and tell that little child, first of all, to give that little child a voice and allow that little child to express his feelings. Allow that little child to look at some of the things he or she didn't get as a child and be able to help that child to be able to do these things today. And that's important. And so what you're actually doing is you're parenting the little child inside of you. That's why in the codependency series, I told everybody, find a photograph of yourself as a little girl, little boy, and be able to spend time with that child. Talk to that child. Get to know that child. That child's you. And that little child needs to be able to express its feelings, get its feelings out. And then as a higher parent, we have to help that child process those feelings. And then we have to realize the fact that powerlessness is such a gift. And yet many of us in the beginning don't look at it as a gift. See, powerlessness, I believe it or not, I say this all the time, is a gift given us by God for us to grow. So powerlessness also very many times involves pain and struggle. Because so many times I don't want to grow, I don't want to learn, I don't want to move forward. I want to be able to fix this situation. And as a result, then we have a tendency very many times, we have a hard time admitting that we're powerless over our past. And yet, we have to realize the fact that every time we try to control something, control is an illusion. When we think we're in control, we're not in control. And I've learned over and over again, what does control do? It gives you agita, makes you half crazy, can give you breakdowns, can drive you right into the ground. Control doesn't work. So if I try to control life, then I'm going to destroy life. So I got to learn that illusion of control can really hurt a lot of us. And that's where we have to realize the fact that every time this concept of being powerless over our past, and that our lives have become unmanageable as a result of it. Now we have to learn the gift of surrender, to surrender to our love and not to our fear. And that's where that third leg comes into play. We're talking about the higher power. We're talking about the energy and the power of love. Every growth process we do in life has to be done through an act of love. All of our growth takes place with that beautiful energy. And that's why the higher parent has to learn how to nurture, to listen to the child, and help the child to be able to heal. Help the child through love to be able to forgive. Help the child in the positive way to be able to grow and learn. Help that child to be able to get through things it never got through before. It's almost like we're being asked to be a parent to ourselves, to be a parent to what has happened to us in our past. You know, it's interesting. I look at my own life, and I don't mind sharing this with you because I told you before, it took me a long time to work through some of this. But today, I can look at all the things I experienced in life, and I try the best of my ability to look at them through the eyes of love, through the eyes of learning, through the eyes of experiences. I don't think I'd be where I am today if it wasn't being able to look through the experiences I went through and be able to look at them in a positive way. But that took a long period of time. And I know I beat myself up for a long time too, because I don't want to look at them. I don't want to do this. So what did I do? When I was in the priesthood, I used to run around playing God instead of listening, even though basically I was really not helping people. I was destroying myself in the process. There was no me. And today I'm grateful there is a me. Those experiences have brought me in a lot of different directions. And I was talking to somebody this morning, and I was saying to her, you know, I can't believe all the things I've been through in my life. And she asked me a question. She said, when did you start working in the field of addiction? I said, I have to stop and think. 1976, when I did chaplaincy work at St. Luke's Hospital in North Philly, the detox center. 1976, that's 44 years ago. It means I'm old, but it's amazing when you come right down to it. Look at the experiences I've experienced, the people I've met, things I've gone through. And I thank God today I can share them, I can talk about them. And I thank God every day for every one of them. So I look at my past, I can look at it negatively, look at it positively. Yes, there was a lot of negative stuff that occurred, but at the same time, I'm learning to be a higher parent. I'm going to take care of the little boy that's inside of me. I'm learning to look at life through the eyes of love. I'm learning to realize what this step is trying to tell me. Love is able to overcome fear. Love is a healing balm. And love is something we have to learn because Course in Miracles even teaches this, that love is much more powerful than fear. Fear holds us down, keeps us in its grips. It'll drive us crazy after a period of time. But we have to learn over and over again that our fears really are only illusions. They're not real. That we truly do learn how to parent ourselves and work through things in ourselves. Then we realize the fact that the fear eventually will subside. And through it, we can learn the art of forgiveness, the art of healing. The first step is only the beginning of this process. That's why I love the steps. And the steps of self-parenting are even more powerful because they really help me to understand that I have to start this process by surrendering. I have to surrender to the things that are going on inside of me. I have to surrender to my pain. I have to surrender to my powerlessness. You know, think of the serenity prayer just for a couple of minutes. The serenity prayer is pretty powerful. Notice it says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I cannot change what I've been through. I can't change my past. I have to be able to acknowledge it. The other mistake we make a lot of times is we try to change our past or get rid of it. You can't. It's your history. And the secret of life and learning comes from history. And so many of us have learned this. If you go back and you look at and go back to studying history, they teach us that people that do not embrace their history are people that never grow. Countries that do not look at their history and learn from it put themselves in the same situation over and over again. History is such a powerful teacher. And so each of us has a history. Each of us is a unique individual. Each of us is a special human being. We have to be able to acknowledge our history, to be in touch with it. It really is a gift. Even though I'll be honest with you, when you go through that grieving process, you don't see it as a gift. You know, grief is a big part of life. And so many times we have to be able to allow that little boy to go through a grieving process. Allow the little child to get angry. Allow him to feel. Allow him to feel sadness. Sadness is part of growth. But the biggest part of the first step is I have to surrender to this process. It's almost like I have to say those two magic words in the first step. I can't. He can. I'm going to let him. I can't is that first phrase. I realize the fact that I need help. I need guidance. I need direction. I need to be able to work through these things with others. So the steps allow us to process a lot of these things from our past, allow us to move forward with them. But you'll notice how they're set up and so beautifully. We'll talk more about that next week. We'll talk about the higher power and the higher concept of love, because basically it's like laying a foundation for us to go through more of a growth process in our life. And that's why self-parenting means each one of us is a powerful, beautiful human being. Each one of us has to learn to parent ourselves, take care of ourselves. What am I really saying when I say parent? I'm learning how to nurture, care for, love, and embrace the little child that's inside of me. I have to realize the fact that that beautiful little child will be with me forever and ever. That little child, of course, gets a little rambunctious once in a while. That little child wants to act out every once in a while. That little child gets a little crazy every once in a while. I said, you know, children a lot of times don't have a lot of boundaries. That's okay. If you raise children, you know what I mean. At 2 o'clock in the morning, if they're hungry, you better get up and feed me. And addicts know what I'm talking about too, because we live in that little kid thing. Like, I want what I want, when I want it now. We get very crazy about this stuff. But this is not something we can just have magically. That's why the first step is saying, you have to experience the fact that you are powerless over your history, powerless over your past. And realize the fact that if we don't accept our powerlessness, then we are accepting unmanageability. And that's why it's important to be able to admit that we're powerless. I want to say this though, because it's really important. To admit to something is intellectual, and it's good. It's the first stage. Eventually, we have to come to acceptance. And acceptance is more spiritual. But it starts with admitting, being able to finally say, whoa, I need help, I need guidance, I need direction. And talk to that little child and say, you know, I really love you, but I want you to have a voice. I want you to be able to express your feelings. Please, it's okay. It's safe for you to do it with me, because I will be here. And no matter how you feel, it's okay. And if I allow that little child to express its feelings, then I can help that little child to heal its feelings. But I have to remember, always try to teach this through the eyes of love, because fear can really bog you down. and be afraid. And life is not to be scared and afraid of. Life is to be lived, to be celebrated, to be honored. Each one of us has to realize the fact that love is the balm. It is the energy of healing. That's why I did that reading tonight. Because I really believe deep down inside that every one of us has that energy inside of us. God gave it to us as a gift. Because each one of us is connected to a higher power. And from that, we do our learning, we do our growing. It's all part of the process we go through in life. And it's really important to look at the words of this step. I admitted our powerlessness to change our past. We have to learn. We can't change history. I'm powerless over that. And that's actually a gift. Many of us in growing up, I know, myself included, when I felt like I was powerless over something, I felt defeated. I felt like I had to control everything. You know, and it's one of the interesting things in my eating disorder program, and we do a lot of readings, and one of the books that we read from talks a lot about the illusion of control. To really think that we're in control. And you know, that's the hardest part of this whole process, because so many of us have a tendency to want to be in control. But really, in reality, there's something greater in us that's in control. We got to be open to that. So it's not about control. It's about nurturing. It's about forgiveness. It's about healing. It's about growth. We have to become willing. I love that term, willing. See, this is not something you can just will to happen. You have to become willing to surrender to love, to allow it into our hearts and minds. And if we learn to love ourselves, like I said last week, then we'll be able to overcome the fears, help that little child overcome its fears, and to see what a beautiful little child that child is. But we have to learn to surrender. You know, very many times, many of us were taught that surrender is a negative word. It really is not a negative word. Surrender simply means, I can't do it. I can't. I need help. And to be able to say those two magic words is a very powerful part of self-parenting. I can say to my inner child, I really want to help you to grow. I want to help you to work through this. But above all, I want to tell you something. I love you. You are so special. You are so beautiful. You are a special little child. And to truly believe that deep down inside of yourself takes you into that first step. Because so many of us have a tendency to live in fear. To live in fear is not healthy. To live in fear is to live in our past, to live in the craziness of our past. We're all going through a lot of stuff. And sometimes if we can't really do the self-parenting thing just through maybe support groups, we may need, in certain situations, some therapy and people to guide us through it, especially if there's major traumas that happen to us in our life. Now, I look back at that gentleman who died at 83. He just had the hardest time surrendering. He kept trying to the best of his ability to control the situation. Now, I can notice how he got angrier and angrier and angrier. And know what was interesting? He ended up having 6 heart attacks in the course of his journey before he died. Because I really believe that fear and those hurts that are deep inside of us as a child can really help hurt us disease-wise too. And that's why we have to learn to accept things. And I'll tell you kind of a funny story. On my body, in the back, I have my right shoulder blade is bigger than my left shoulder blade. Now, my wife will tell you, I went through rolfing. I went through all kinds of exercises trying to get them to fix it, to make it straight, all this kind of stuff and everything else. Then I realized something. My right shoulder blade is bigger than my left shoulder blade. And I found out my mother's right shoulder blade was bigger than the left shoulder blade. So now guess what? I'm going to have my right shoulder blade will always be bigger than my left one. And I'm powerless over it. Once I was able to experience that and get in touch with it, it brought me a better sense of peace. You know, because I tried everything to change it, to control it. It's the same thing. I always laugh about this today because if you look at my ankles, my left ankle is bigger than my right ankle. There's a reason behind that. When I was kind of a young kid at 19, I used to play baseball, and I slid into second base and broke my ankle. They fixed it and all that, but then, as stupid things you do as kids, I decided I didn't feel like waiting for it to completely heal. I decided to play on it. Now I have this wonderful ankle that will be like that. And the only way I can get it fixed now is to have to re-break it and reset it. I'm not doing that. It's fine. It doesn't bother me, except, of course, sometimes it helps me tell the weather what's coming up every once in a while. But again, it's part of who I am. It's part of my makeup. So if you look at those things on a physical level, there's so many things about our body as we're powerless over it. We have to be able to accept it. And from acceptance comes growth. Now take that into your emotional self and take it into your spiritual self. These are all parts of who we are as people. And so that first step is teaching me I have to surrender to love, surrender to healing, and try my best not to surrender to fear. Because fear can tear you to shreds. And so what I'm going to share with you tonight in that first step is going to lead us into the second and third step, which we'll talk about next week. We're going to talk in the concept about faith next week and learning how to let go and learning how to release that control so that little child inside of you can do a lot of growing. And I get excited about this because it helps me to recommit deep down inside of myself to be a parent to my little boy. I want to be a higher parent to my little boy. I want to be able to give my little boy a lot of love. And I'm going to give him the kind of love that the little boy deserves. My mother over-smothered me and over-loved me. But it really wasn't. It was control. It really was. Now I understand all that today. And so what I want to do tonight is say a prayer to kind of connect us to this love, connect us to God, and to realize the energy and beauty we have inside of ourselves as people. So let us pray. God, we come before you tonight as your people. We come before you in humility and gratitude. We ask you, please, to help us to look at life, to look at our past. Help us to be a stronger parent. Help us to be able to look at that little child inside of us and nurture it and take care of it and help that little child to grow. Deep down inside, we are all little children. We are your little children. And deep down inside, we all need the concept of growth. So help us to be able to work past our fears. Give us the strength and energy of your love. Help us to reactivate the love you gave us from our birth. For you are love. You are the energy of love. I also say very thank you tonight to those people that have gone before us. All those people who touched our lives in one way or another. I remember so many beautiful memories. I thank God for them. I thank God for every person that's gone on the journey. Try every day. God, please help us to look in gratitude to the things we've experienced and to be open to new growth. Thank you, God, for the gift of life, for the gift of the past, and above all, for the gift of being able to be a higher parent to that little child inside of us. We pray, God, and we ask that you bless us and be with us. And we do this in your name. Amen. Now I'm going to ask all of you, if you want to unmute, we'll say the serenity prayer together, okay? We're going to do the
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God's will, not mine, be done.